I'm an architect. I build things meant to last for centuries. But it only took one bite of a spring roll to demolish my entire life. My sister, Megan, watched me gasp for air, my throat closing, and said, "Oh, relax. It was just a little peanut oil. I thought you were being dramatic about that allergy." While the paramedics were loading me into the ambulance, my career and my future bleeding out on my own living room floor, my 10-year-old nephew, Leo, had the audacity to ask his mom if they could still have dessert. They didn't visit me in the hospital. They didn't even call. But that was fine. It gave me the quiet I needed to call my lawyer and have an eviction notice drawn up. Because the house they were so comfortable in, the one they were planning to eat dessert in, while I was fighting for my life, it was mine, and their lease was about to expire. Permanently. It was supposed to be the most important night of my career. For 6 months, I had poured every ounce of my soul into a design proposal for the new Harrison Foundation Museum of Modern Art. This wasn't just another building. It was a legacy project. Winning this contract would elevate my small, independent firm into the major leagues. It was the kind of project architects dream about. The kind that gets your name written into history books. And I was a finalist. The final step was a presentation, but I wanted to do something more personal than a sterile boardroom pitch. I invited the 3 board members from the Harrison Foundation to my home for an intimate dinner. I wanted to show them not just my blueprints, but my world. The space I designed for myself, the attention to detail, the curated atmosphere. It was all part of the pitch. My home was my 3-dimensional resume. Everything had to be perfect. The lighting, the music, the floral arrangements. I had storyboarded the entire evening. And the food, of course, was critical. I'd hired a private chef known for his exquisite, minimalist cuisine. The menu was designed to be elegant, impressive, and, above all, safe. Because I have a severe life-threatening anaphylactic allergy to peanuts. It's not a preference. It's not an intolerance. A trace amount of peanut protein can send me into respiratory arrest within minutes. My entire life is a carefully constructed system of avoidance. I read every label. I call restaurants in advance. I carry 2 EpiPens with me at all times. Everyone in my life knows this. It is the single most important non-negotiable fact about my physical existence. My family, of course, was aware of the dinner. And in their typical fashion, they decided my meticulously planned evening needed their personal touch. My sister Megan called me the day before. "Clara, I know you've hired that fancy chef, but it feels so impersonal. You know the Harrisons are all about family values. Mom and I want to bring a dish. Just an appetizer. Something with a homemade feel." I hesitated. A cold knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. "Megan, I appreciate it, but it's all handled. The menu is set, and with my allergy, it's just safer this way. The chef is preparing everything in a sterile, peanut-free kitchen." There was a sigh on the other end of the line, dripping with manufactured disappointment. "Fine. I just thought, you know, you always push us away. You make everything so complicated and clinical. We just wanted to help, to be a part of your big night." That was the hook, the guilt. It was her favorite tool. The idea that my safety protocols were a personal rejection of their love. My mother called an hour later, echoing the sentiment. "Your sister is so hurt, Clara. She had the most wonderful idea for her Vietnamese spring rolls. You know how much your father loves them. It would mean so much to us to contribute. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the pristine empty countertops, and felt that old familiar pressure. The pressure to be easier, less difficult, less me. Against my better judgment, against every screaming instinct in my body, I relented. "Okay," I said, my voice tight. "One dish. An appetizer. But you swear to me, Megan. You absolutely swear. There are no peanuts. No peanut oil, no peanut sauce, no cross-contamination. You have to be 100% certain." "Oh my God, Clara, of course," she chirped, her voice suddenly bright and cheerful. "I'm not an idiot. I know how serious it is. I'll be extra careful. Promise." That promise hung in the air, a structure I desperately wanted to believe was sound. But, as I would soon find out, some foundations are built on nothing but lies, and the collapse is always more devastating than you can imagine. The feeling of being a burden is a slow-acting poison. For as long as I can remember, my allergy wasn't treated as a medical condition by my family. It was treated as a personality flaw, an inconvenience, an attention-seeking drama I insisted on staging at every family gathering. Birthdays were the worst. While other kids dove into cakes and cookies, I'd be in a corner with a safe apple I'd brought from home, watching my mother explain to other parents in a hushed, apologetic tone. "Oh, Clara can't have that. She's sensitive." The word hung in the air, synonymous with difficult or weird. My sister Megan, 2 years older, was the sun around which our family planet revolved. She was effortlessly charming, popular, and blessedly allergically normal. She could eat anything, go anywhere, do anything, without a second thought. My childhood was a minefield of labels, questions, and constant, low-grade fear. Hers was a carefree breeze. The disparity created a rift between us that only widened with time. She saw my caution as weakness, my questions to waiters as embarrassing, my EpiPens as a cry for attention. "No one is trying to poison you, Clara," she'd sigh dramatically when I'd refuse a homemade cookie from a bake sale. My parents, desperate to maintain an image of a perfect, harmonious family, always sided with her. They were conflict-averse, and my allergy was a constant source of potential conflict. It was easier to manage me than to manage the world around me. "Just don't eat it, dear," my dad would say, as if it were that simple. "Don't make a scene." Making a scene was the cardinal sin. My survival, it seemed, was secondary to their comfort. When I was 16 at a family barbecue, my uncle, a well-meaning but clueless man, proudly announced he'd used a new marinade for the chicken. I asked what was in it. He waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, just some spices, a little soy sauce, some satay stuff." My blood ran cold. Satay almost always contains peanuts. I politely declined the chicken. Megan rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out. "Oh my God, here we go again. Can't you just have one normal day?" My father pulled me aside later, his voice low and firm. "You embarrassed your uncle. You need to learn to be more gracious." I tried to explain that gracious could get me killed. He told me I was being hysterical. This dynamic bled into every aspect of our lives. When I got into a prestigious architecture program, my mother's first comment was, "That's wonderful, honey. But I hope you have a roommate who understands your situation. Not congratulations, but a reminder of my otherness, my difficulty. When Megan got a promotion as a regional manager for a retail chain, they threw her a lavish party. The subtext was always there. Megan's successes were effortless, pure. Mine were complicated, achieved in spite of the logistical nightmare that was my body. They loved me, I suppose, in the way one loves a delicate, valuable but incredibly frustrating piece of porcelain. They were terrified I would break, and deeply resentful of the care my preservation required. So when Megan and my mother insisted on bringing that appetizer to the most important dinner of my life, it wasn't just about food. It was a power play. It was their way of inserting themselves into my world, of proving that their folksy, normal way was superior to my clinical, complicated success. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to rewrite my narrative. They wanted to be the heroes of the story, the ones who added the heart and soul to my cold, architectural precision. And I, conditioned by decades of seeking their approval, of wanting to be seen as easy and normal for once, I let them. I agreed. I trusted them. I ignored the blaring alarm bells in my own head, the ones that had kept me safe my entire life, because the desire to finally, for once, not make a scene was more powerful than my instinct for survival. It was a catastrophic structural failure, and the first tremor was the sound of my doorbell ringing. The evening started flawlessly. The Harrisons arrived. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, an elegant couple in their late 60s, and their son David, who was set to take over the foundation. They were warm, engaging, and genuinely impressed with my home. "The use of light in this space is just remarkable, Clara," Mr. Harrison commented, looking up at the skylights in the atrium. "You have a true gift." I felt a swell of pride. This was working. The private chef was a ghost in the kitchen, sending out plates of delicate, beautiful food that was as much art as sustenance. The conversation flowed from architecture to art to philanthropy. I was in my element, confident and in control. Then, the doorbell rang again. It was my family. My mom, my dad, and Megan, holding a large covered platter. My heart did a nervous little flip-flop. "We won't stay long," my mom announced brightly, stepping inside as if she owned the place. "We just wanted to drop this off and say a quick hello." Megan swept into the dining room, placing the platter on the sideboard. "Just some homemade spring rolls," she said, beaming at the Harrisons. "Clara is so formal, we had to inject a little family chaos into the evening." She laughed, a light tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. The Harrisons smiled politely, charmed by the display of familial warmth. I walked over to Megan, keeping my voice low. "You're absolutely sure about these? No peanuts?" She shot me an annoyed look, a flash of the old resentment in her eyes. "Clara, I told you. It's fine. Don't be weird in front of your guests." She turned away before I could press further, engaging Mrs. Harrison in a loud, animated conversation about her charity work. The chef, seeing the unauthorized dish, gave me a look of sharp concern from the kitchen doorway. I gave him a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head, a silent command to stand down. I couldn't make a scene. Not now. My family left after a few excruciatingly long minutes of small talk. As they were leaving, my 10-year-old nephew, Leo, who had tagged along, piped up. "Aunt Clara, can I have one of those?" He pointed at the spring rolls. "Leo, no," Megan snapped. "Those are for the guests." He pouted. "But they look like the ones you made last week with the peanut sauce." My entire body went rigid. I turned to Megan. The blood was roaring in my ears. "What did he just say?" Megan's face paled slightly. She forced a laugh. "Oh, kids, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I made a completely different batch for you. A special safe batch." She practically shoved Leo out the door. "Don't be silly." But the seed of doubt had been planted. I should have thrown the platter in the trash right then and there. I should have stopped everything. But the Harrisons were watching. David Harrison was already reaching for one. "These look incredible," he said. And in that moment, my fear of social awkwardness eclipsed my fear of death. I thought, she wouldn't. She couldn't. She promised. I watched David take a bite. He chewed, swallowed, and smiled. "Delicious," he declared. He was fine. Nothing happened. A wave of relief washed over me. Leo must have been mistaken. Megan was telling the truth. So when Mrs. Harrison offered me the platter, I smiled and took one. It was a gesture of trust, a peace offering to the ghost of my difficult childhood. A way of saying, "See, I can be normal. I can trust my family." I put the small, perfectly wrapped roll in my mouth. The first flavor was mint and cilantro, fresh and bright. The second was a faint, savory richness I couldn't quite place. And the third was the terrifying, unmistakable taste of my own mortality. It was peanut. Not a lot. Just a trace. A whisper of peanut oil used in the pan, perhaps. But it was enough. The reaction started as a faint tingling on my tongue. Then, a prickling heat in my throat. I excused myself from the table, trying to appear calm, and walked quickly to the kitchen. By the time I reached the counter, my airway was beginning to swell. It felt like swallowing fire and glass. I fumbled in my purse for my EpiPen, my fingers suddenly clumsy and uncooperative. I could hear the concerned voices from the dining room. "Is she all right?" I pulled the cap off the injector and jammed it into my thigh, the sharp kick of the needle a small pain compared to the massive, suffocating panic that was taking over. I gasped for air, but my lungs wouldn't respond. Black spots danced in my vision. The last thing I saw before I collapsed was the horrified face of the chef in the doorway, shouting my name as he dialed 911. Waking up in a hospital is a uniquely disorienting experience. The first thing I registered was the rhythmic, insistent beeping of a machine next to my bed. The second was the sterile, antiseptic smell that clings to everything. The third was the raw, scraped feeling in my throat from the intubation tube that had been breathing for me. A nurse with kind eyes was checking my vitals. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare. Your sister is listed as your emergency contact. We called her. She said she'd try to stop by later." Try. The word hung in the sterile air, heavy with indifference. My mind, groggy from the medication, began to piece things together. The dinner, the Harrisons, the spring roll, the terrifying swift descent into anaphylaxis. I reached for my phone on the bedside table, my hand shaking. There were a few texts from friends asking if I was okay. News apparently travels fast. There was nothing from my mother, nothing from my father. And from Megan, There was a single infuriating message, sent 3 hours after I'd been admitted. It read, "Heard what happened. So sorry for the mix-up. Things got crazy in the kitchen. Hope you feel better soon. LMK if you need anything." A mix-up. As if she'd used salt instead of sugar. As if she'd grabbed the wrong coat. Not as if she had served me poison on a silver platter after swearing it was safe. The casual, breezy tone of the text felt like a slap in the face. There was no panic, no frantic apology, no sign of the gut-wrenching guilt any decent human being would feel. There was just dismissal. Then my phone rang. It was my boss and mentor, Richard, the senior partner at my firm. "Clara, my God, are you all right? I heard from David Harrison." My heart sank. "What did he say?" I asked, my voice a raw croak. Richard sighed. It was a sound I knew well. The sound of bad news being delivered with professional regret. He was very concerned, of course. But, Clara, they're pulling out. They've withdrawn your proposal from consideration. I closed my eyes. The beeping of the monitor seemed to get louder. Why? It wasn't just the medical emergency. As awful as that was, Richard explained gently. David said the whole situation felt unstable. Your family showing up unannounced, the chaos. He said the foundation values stability and meticulous planning above all else. The incident, to them, was a reflection of poor judgment, a lack of control. They can't risk a billion-dollar project on someone who, in his words, can't even manage a dinner party. Each word was a nail in the coffin of my dreams. It wasn't fair. It wasn't logical. But it was final. I had lost. Everything I had worked for, sacrificed for, poured my life into, for 6 months. Gone. Not because my design was flawed, but because my sister was. I ended the call and lay there, staring at the acoustic tile ceiling. The beeping of the machine was the only sound. It was the metronome counting down the seconds of my old life. The grief was a physical weight on my chest, as real as the allergic reaction that had put me there. But underneath the grief, a new feeling began to crystallize. It was cold, hard, and sharp. It was rage. A quiet, clarifying rage. This wasn't a mix-up. This wasn't an accident. I replayed Leo's words in my head. They looked like the ones you made last week with the peanut sauce. Megan hadn't made a special batch. She had lied. She had brought a dish she knew was potentially contaminated, either through sheer sociopathic carelessness, or, and this thought was even more chilling, through intent. She had gambled with my life to avoid the minor inconvenience of making a separate, safe dish. She had prioritized her ego over my existence. And my family, my parents, had enabled it. Their silence now was their verdict. They had chosen her side, the side of ease and convenience, just as they always had. The rage didn't make me want to scream. It made me preternaturally calm. It burned away all the fog of guilt, obligation, and the desperate need for their approval. For the first time, I saw the structure of my family with perfect, brutal clarity. It was a toxic, unstable edifice, and I was the load-bearing wall they had been slowly cracking for 30 years. Well, the wall was done holding them up. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call my sister to scream at her. I didn't call my mother to cry. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for my lawyer. "Hi, Robert," I said, my voice steady and clear. It's Clara. I need you to draw up an eviction notice. Yes, for my family. Effective immediately. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure? He asked. Yes, I replied, looking out the hospital window at the city skyline I had once dreamed of shaping. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. It's time to condemn the property. The house they lived in wasn't just any house. It was my inheritance. My maternal grandfather, a stern but fair man who had been an engineer, was the only person in my family who ever truly took my allergy seriously. He saw it, not as a weakness, but as a variable that needed to be accounted for in the design of my life. When I was 10, he built a small separate cabinet in his kitchen just for my food. He labeled it Clara's Safe, with a label maker. He was the one who taught me to read ingredient lists, like they were blueprints, to understand that hidden dangers lurked in vague terms like natural flavors, or processed in a facility that also handles nuts. He respected my diligence, because he was a diligent man himself. A good design has no surprises, he used to say. When he passed away, he left his house, a beautiful, sturdy, mid-century brick home in a quiet, leafy suburb, to me. Not to my parents, not to Megan and me jointly, but solely to me. His will was explicit. He told me privately before he died, "Your parents are good people, but they are soft. Your sister is careless. You are the one who knows how to maintain a structure. This house is your foundation. Don't ever let anyone compromise it." I was 22 at the time, just starting my career. My parents were downsizing, and Megan was in the middle of a messy divorce with no savings. They came to me with a proposal. "Let us live in Grandpa's house for a little while," my mother had pleaded. "Just until we get back on our feet. It's too big for you alone anyway. We'll take care of it for you." A little while turned into 10 years. I never charged them rent. I paid the property taxes and the homeowner's insurance. It was my contribution, my way of easing my guilt for having been the chosen one in my grandfather's will. It was my penance for being the difficult, allergic child. I thought the gesture would earn me their respect, maybe even their gratitude. Instead, it bred entitlement. It became their house. They complained about the old plumbing. They criticized the outdated kitchen. My ownership of the property became an inconvenient technicality they preferred to ignore. This history replayed in my mind as I lay in that hospital bed. Grandpa's words echoed. "Don't ever let anyone compromise it." And they had. They had compromised my health, my career, and my home. They had turned my foundation into a place of danger. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a single incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of small and large betrayals. I remembered my 15th birthday. Megan had forgotten and served a cake with peanut butter frosting. I had a mild reaction, hives and swelling, and spent the night miserable on Benadryl. My mother's response? "Oh, Megan feels just terrible. Don't be too hard on her." There was the time in college when I was shortlisted for a prestigious summer internship in Chicago. I needed a letter of recommendation from a family friend who was a respected architect. My father was supposed to mail the application packet for me. It arrived a week late. The deadline had passed. "It must have slipped my mind," he'd said with a shrug. There was a lot going on. But Megan had gotten a new car that week, and the lot going on was the entire family fawning over her. My opportunity, my structure, had been demolished by their casual neglect. Each memory was a brick in a wall of evidence. This wasn't just about a spring roll. It was about a fundamental lack of respect for my life, my ambitions, and my boundaries. My generosity with the house had not been seen as a gift. It had been seen as my duty. My success was not something to be celebrated. It was something to be brought down a peg, to be seasoned with their humble touch, to be tainted with their chaos, until it was no longer solely mine. They couldn't stand to see me build something for myself without them being at the center of it. And when my safety protocols got in the way of their narrative, they simply ignored them. This time, their negligence had cost me the dream of a lifetime, and I was done paying for their comfort with my own well-being. The eviction notice wasn't just about a house. It was a demolition permit for the toxic family structure I had been trapped in for far too long. I was discharged 2 days later, armed with a new prescription for EpiPens and a cold, hard resolve that felt like rebar in my soul. I went home to my apartment, a quiet sanctuary that now felt violated by the memory of what had happened there. I ignored the texts and the single, perfunctory voicemail from my mother, asking if I was up and about yet. I didn't want to talk. I wanted to act. My lawyer, Robert, emailed me the finalized eviction notice. It was a standard, legally airtight, 30-day notice to quit. Looking at the formal, impersonal language on the PDF felt like drawing a clean, sharp line on a blueprint. This is the boundary. This is where their space ends, and mine begins. I printed it out, put it in a crisp manila envelope, and drove to my grandfather's house. My house. Pulling into the driveway, I saw Megan's car parked next to my father's. Perfect. They were all there. I took a deep breath, the air feeling cleaner and colder than it had in years. I walked up the stone path my grandfather and I had laid one summer, and I knocked on the front door. My mother opened it, a complicated expression of relief and annoyance on her face. "Clara! Thank goodness. We were so worried. Why haven't you been answering your phone?" she said, her tone more accusatory than concerned. "I've been recovering," I said, stepping past her into the foyer. My father was in the living room, watching TV. Megan was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, a half-eaten bag of chips beside her. None of them looked particularly grief-stricken. They looked inconvenienced. "Well, you gave us all quite a fright," my father said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "You really should be more careful." The audacity of that statement hung in the air, so thick I could have choked on it. I turned to Megan. "More careful?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I was careful. I trusted you." Megan finally looked up from her phone, her expression defensive. "Look, I already said I was sorry. It was a tiny mistake. You completely overreacted and ruined your own party." "A mistake?" I took a step closer. "Leo told me you made the same spring rolls last week with peanut sauce. You didn't make a special batch, did you, Megan?" Her face flushed. "He's a child. He gets confused. I can't believe you're blaming me for this. You're the one who collapsed on the floor and had to be carried out like a crazy person. It was humiliating. Do you know how embarrassing it was to explain that to people? That was it. The final load-bearing pillar of my denial crumbled into dust. She wasn't sorry she almost killed me. She was angry that my near-death experience had embarrassed her. My mother quickly jumped in. Now let's not place blame. What's done is done. The important thing is that you're okay, Clara. We're all just a bit shaken up. No, I said, my voice as cold and hard as granite. We are not all anything. I am not okay. And what's done is not done. I walked to the living room coffee table and placed the manila envelope on it. What is that? My dad asked, finally muting the television. I looked at each of them, one by one, meeting their confused, entitled gazes. That is a legally binding eviction notice, I said, enunciating each word with precision. I want you all out of my house in 30 days. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens in the moments after a building implodes, before the dust has even begun to settle. My mother stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. My father's face went from confusion to a deep, mottled red. Megan just laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving bark. You're kidding, right? This is a joke. A sick, twisted joke because you're mad about the dinner. Do I look like I'm joking? I asked. I lost the Harrison project because of you. I ended up in an emergency room because of you. You have treated my home like your own, and my life like an afterthought for the last time. This is our home, my mother cried, her voice cracking. We've lived here for 10 years. You have stayed here as my guests in my house, I corrected her. That courtesy has been revoked. You have 30 days to find alternative arrangements. My father stood up then, his fists clenched. You ungrateful brat! After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me? I cut him off, my own voice rising for the first time, not with hysteria, but with the force of a tectonic shift. You have done nothing but make me feel like a liability my entire life. You minimized my health, you dismissed my ambitions, and you taught her, I said, pointing a trembling finger at Megan, that there are no consequences for her actions. Well, class is in session. The consequences have arrived. They're in that envelope. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding but my spine straight. Get a lawyer if you want, I said over my shoulder. It won't make a difference. The foundation of this arrangement is gone. The structure is condemned. I walked out the door and didn't look back, leaving them to stare at the wreckage they had created. The 30 days that followed were a Cold War, fought through text messages and voicemails. The initial shock from my family curdled into a predictable sequence of outrage, pleading, and guilt-tripping. My mother left long, rambling voicemails, her voice thick with tears. How can you do this to your own family, Clara? We'll be homeless. Is this what Grandpa would have wanted? My father sent curt, angry texts. You've made your point. Now stop this nonsense. Megan, predictably, tried to rally the extended family to her cause. My phone lit up with messages from aunts and cousins. Heard there's some trouble. Megan is just devastated. Maybe you're being a little too harsh. And my personal favorite, from an uncle. Family is family. You have to forgive. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I created a group text with my parents and Megan. My first and only message was a link to a local real estate agent's website. My second was a link to apartment rental listings. I then muted the conversation. I refused to engage in the emotional theater. My decision was not a negotiation tactic. It was a verdict. They had spent my whole life demanding I not make a scene, and now, in my quiet, unyielding silence, they were falling apart. They didn't know how to fight a war without a screaming match. My calmness was a fortress they couldn't breach. Meanwhile, I was dealing with my own fallout. Losing the Harrison project was a brutal blow, not just to my firm's finances, but to my morale. I had to let go of a junior architect I'd just hired. I had to call clients and reassure them that, despite the rumors they were surely hearing, my firm was stable. It was humiliating and exhausting. There were days I'd sit at my drafting table, unable to draw a single line, the ghost of that museum design mocking me. The physical recovery was easier. The rawness in my throat faded, but a new kind of hypervigilance took its place. I second-guessed every meal. I felt a phantom tingle on my tongue whenever I tried a new food. The trust I had foolishly placed in my sister was gone, and it had taken a piece of my own peace of mind with it. About 2 weeks before the deadline, I got a call from Robert, my lawyer. "Clara, your father is threatening legal action. He's claiming an oral contract, emotional distress, you name it. He says you're an unfit property owner." I sighed, rubbing my temples. Does he have a case? "Not a leg to stand on," Robert said confidently. "It's a scare tactic. They're trying to bully you into backing down. I just wanted to keep you informed. My advice? Stay the course." And I did. The final week arrived. I drove by the house one evening and saw a moving truck parked in the driveway. It was a strange, hollow victory. Seeing their lives packed into cardboard boxes didn't bring me joy. It just felt necessary, like a controlled demolition. Painful, loud, but required for new construction to begin. The day after the deadline, I went to the house with a locksmith. The place was empty, but they hadn't left it clean. There were scuff marks on the walls, trash left in the kitchen, and a palpable feeling of angry resentment lingering in the air. On the kitchen counter, right where Megan had placed her platter of spring rolls, was a single, overturned family photo of all of us, taken years ago. My face was scratched out. I picked it up, looked at the crude, violent gouge marks, and felt a profound, aching sadness. Then, I dropped it into the trash can. As the locksmith changed the locks, the solid, satisfying click of the new deadbolt sliding into place felt like the first line being drawn on a new blueprint. A blueprint for a life where the walls were my own, the foundation was secure, and I was the only architect in charge of the design. It's been 6 months. The house is clean now. I hired a crew to repaint the walls, refinish the floors, and update the kitchen my parents had always complained about. I did it for me. I did it for my grandfather. Reclaiming the space, making it my own, has been a form of therapy. I haven't decided if I'll move in or sell it, but for the first time, the choice is entirely mine, free from the weight of obligation. The silence from my family has been deafening. I hear through the grapevine that my parents moved into a small condo an hour away, and Megan is renting a tiny apartment above a laundromat. According to my aunt, they tell everyone I had a mental breakdown and threw them out for no reason. They have painted themselves as the victims in a tragedy of my making. Some days, a wave of guilt washes over me. Did I go too far? Was there a less destructive way to build a boundary? I see families laughing in the park, sisters shopping together, and I feel a pang of loss for the family I wished I had, the one that never really existed. But then I remember the feeling of my throat closing. I remember the casual cruelty in Megan's text message. I remember the look on her face when she called my near-death experience humiliating for her. And the guilt recedes, replaced by the quiet certainty of self-preservation. The most important lesson I've learned is that forgiveness and accountability are not the same thing. For years, I practiced a cheap form of forgiveness, absorbing the hurt and asking for nothing in return, hoping that my grace would somehow inspire their decency. It never did. It only taught them that my boundaries were suggestions, that my safety was negotiable. True accountability is a foundation. Without it, any relationship is built on unstable ground, doomed to collapse. They never took accountability for what they did. Not for the spring roll, not for the years of dismissiveness. So, I had to hold them accountable myself. The eviction was not an act of revenge. It was an act of architectural integrity. I was reinforcing my own life structure. I didn't get the Harrison Museum, but a few weeks ago I won a smaller local contract to design a new community library. It's not as glamorous, but as I work on the plans, I feel a sense of purpose I thought I had lost. I'm designing a safe space for everyone, with wide-open sightlines and clear, honest materials. A place with no hidden dangers. A place built on a solid foundation. It's a start. It's new construction, and it's all mine. So I have to ask you, was I wrong to evict my own family? Was there another way to handle a betrayal that was not only personal, but professional and potentially fatal? Or is cutting toxic people out of your life, no matter who they are, the only way to truly build a safe home for yourself? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I read every single one, and I could really use some outside perspective on this. And if my story resonates with you, please consider subscribing for more real-life stories about drawing blueprints for a better life. Thank you for listening.